The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready for Insights to Incite? Ready or not, it's showtime. Now get ready to listen in and watch right here on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Join us and together we will escape the mundane. Insights to Incite, here is your host, Brandon Lawson.
This has been called The Thief of Time. And Mr. Dickens suggests that we collar him, put a rein on him, and not allow him to possess or control. In addition, this has been referenced as opportunity's natural assassin and as the grave in which opportunity is buried. Friend, do you suffer from this dreadful disease? I know I do. I have yet to be able to kick it completely out of me, and as a result have had to endure the consequences of it. The hockey great Wayne Gretzky says this is one of the most common and deadliest of diseases, and its toll on success and happiness, according to Gretzky, is heavy. Today is Thursday, October 14th. This is Brandon Lawson, your host, coming to you from my home here in Ohio. In our show today, we begin a new series titled Issues that Inhibit Us. So, just what is this thief of time? This natural assassin and arch nemesis to opportunity? Friend, this gravely disease that I am speaking of is procrastination. Yes, procrastination is the thief of time, and Charles Dickens suggests that we collar him. Procrastination indeed is opportunity's natural assassin and the grave in which opportunity is buried. Do you struggle with this? You know, such and such needs done, yet you keep putting it off. And this is even with the realization that, here, if you know that you have to tend to it, you have to do it, you're not going to be loosed from it, and it's going to persist until you get it done. And so you keep putting it off anyways, whatever it is. Well, as I stated, I struggle with this, and in recognizing my struggles, that I'm not the expert in this field by any stretch of the imagination, and recognizing this, I have invited a friend to join us today. My friend joins us from the nation's capital in the DC metro area, and you might have heard him referred to as your procrastination prevention partner, Eric Twiggs. Eric is the president and founding partner of the What Now movement. His mission reads to build high-performing entrepreneurs, authors, and career professionals who are prepared for life's unexpected curveballs. He is the author of the discipline of Now, 12 Practical Principles to Overcome Procrastination. The discipline of Now was recognized as a global top 10 finalist for the 2020 Author Elite Awards in the category of Best Self-Help Book. Eric also has been called upon to make a guest appearance on several different shows, such as Value and Leadership Podcast, Ethel Marketing Podcast, the Business of Business Podcast, to name a few, as well as being a speaker at the Focused and Fulfilled Summit. In addition, you can find him each week as he hosts his own podcast, The 30-Minute Hour. Without any further ado, please welcome to the show, Eric Twiggs.
All right. Hey, Brandon, thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. So, just wanted to ask you, this Now movement, that's quite interesting. And I mean, was there something that touched you deep within from a personal experience, or just someone you knew, how it was a constant problem, or just through observation of society as a whole? But what really was the driving force behind saying, I got to get this movement in motion?
Well, I'll say I need to start from the very beginning, right? Because people always ask me, okay, Eric, why do you focus on procrastination? Why is this such a hot button issue for you? So for me, it started in college, right? It was my senior year in Hampton University, and I'm having this conversation with a good friend of mine named Donnell and Brandon. I have to admit, in those days, we were a little different, Donnell and I. Like, he was all about his purpose, and I was all about the party. And
Okay.
he was always giving me a hard time, saying that I needed to focus and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I'd be like, man, loosen up. We have plenty of time for that serious stuff. Are you coming to the frat party with me or not? And so several weeks go by. I don't talk to him. But then I get a phone call from his mother informing me that he was killed in a car accident.
Oh,
Changed everything for me. It sent me the message that maybe I don't have the time that I think to do the things that I need to do. And from that moment, I've been thinking about overcoming procrastination, becoming more productive. How am I spending my time? How are other people spending their time? But that was really the moment that became very important for me.
right. I hear you. You hear that a lot about people who, something that, especially when it was such a huge, almost like a U-turn. It was a sharp turn. It wasn't just a slight curve. It was when something, sadly, it had to be something of such a dire consequence or what have you for that to come to be. But you hear that a lot with people. You'll hear of someone who, whatever it might be, but especially when someone they were friends with and they were doing lived this pretty much the same life or something similar to the thing that happened, that was the many times was the issue or the cause of the friends. you know
Yeah,
yeah,
and what really stood out to me was that Donnell was probably the cleanest living person that I knew
right.
at the time. This guy, he was clean lifestyle, very spiritual, and it was a single car accident. Like the
Right.
roads were wet. So it's
Oh,
like if that could happen to him, you just never know when it's going to be your time. So
right.
that was the other piece of that message that
Exactly.
really got me thinking about how am I spending my time.
Yeah, because if he wasn't one to do the partying or that, or to be where that would be an issue, and then of all people to be taken, so to speak. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I hear you there. Yeah. Yes, I had wondered, because it's interesting. I know me personally, as I alluded to, I struggle with procrastination, and I think a lot of us do, and it's only on certain things. Some things I can have at it, get at it. Other things I know I need to get it done, but I don't want to. And I keep putting it off. And that. But this is an interesting topic, and when I saw that, was happy to see that you and Esther responded. And that because if you hadn't responded, ain't no way getting you on here. You know. But yeah, in light of that, I was wanting to, you know, uh, share with us about the book you wrote, The Discipline of Now, and where the people in our audience can find that. Is that on Amazon? I'm sure it's on your website, but
Yeah, it's on my website, ericmtwigs.com, but it's also on Amazon as well. So, you can get it. It's in audio, it's on paperback, and it's in ebook format,
okay,
whichever is your preference.
okay, that's good to know. And so, yeah, I wanted to, in talking about the show today, I don't know where all your studies and research in that on this subject of procrastination has taken you. No, but have you noticed this to be more or less of an issue in other parts of the world?
Well, from all of my research, it's a global thing. So the study I saw a study from the University of Calgary, and they said that 95% of the population has some type of an issue with procrastination. Now I believe, Brandon, that the other 5% they haven't gotten around and taken the survey yet. They've been putting it off. So, but
Yeah,
no, I haven't seen anything that says this part of
right.
the world they procrastinate less. Now I do
Okay.
think there are probably parts of the world where they have less distractions. Like
That's
I
what I
think,
was going to hint at here.
yeah, yeah,
Because
I think we are more distracted. It's easier to
most
procrastinate
definitely,
now
yeah, that's what
than it
I,
may have been in years
yeah.
past.
Because what I wrote here, this is just from my own thoughts on the subject, is I sense that in areas that are more desolate or remote and that don't have a stable economy are not dealing with this issue nearly as much as, you know, those of us, that are, that I think of, you know, I think of this as in line with salvation and then the conversion rate of people getting saved. If you look at rundown parts of the world, the conversion rate tends to be higher as opposed to areas that are built up or even where the economy is booming. And a lot of that is the distraction. When they're in such dire straits, we're running to God, crying out, our own arms are wide open. Help, what I'm all yours, because the life we have would be horrible. Whereas when our life isn't, such darkness and doom and gloom, we got plenty of things we can do. What I wrote here is that the the commerce that's available to us, being such as in the U.S. or maybe England and Europe, some other parts of the world, the commerce that's available to us is in so many forms and such that it's a distraction. It preoccupies us and in turn wears us down, not only physically, but we're trying to do so much can drain us emotionally, and therefore that stagnates us. Unlike when we're, in such a darkness and we're crying out to God, I'm all open, all ears, my heart's wide open because I need answers. And I think that in the same respect, with the, when they don't have as much to do, they're not caught up in putting things off. Because what
Well,
is there to do?
so what I think is,
Yeah.
it's the old saying that people don't change until the pain of remaining the same outweighs the pain of making the change, right?
Okay.
When you're at a point where you're like, I don't have any other options, right? I
Right.
just, if I don't do this, my family is not going to eat. Then
Right.
you'll probably be less likely to procrastinate than if you're in a situation where you feel like you're comfortable. It's not the end of the world that if it doesn't
Yeah.
happen. And like I see it even with business people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have your own business and making that sale is the difference between you feeding your family or not,
Right.
you're going to approach it differently than someone who, let's say, they've got a comfortable government position and they're doing something on the side.
Exactly.
So I think it's that pain element, and I
Yeah.
think it's easy to take things for granted when things are going well. So
Yep.
I do think that factors into it.
And that was part of what I'm going on here as well. It's a good point because what I put here is you know, is that you know, when we talk about just like crying out to God, we're in dire straits, and when you're thinking about third world country or whatever, or even it could be here in the U.S. and you're just you know you're broke and homeless or whatever it might be, but I the way I see it is, when we have it good, it's like we drop the father in the way to the wayside. And, and I don't know who does or doesn't, but I sense that many times it's not a conscious thought to where we say, Father, I don't need you. It's just that we end up, nonetheless, we live that way. It's almost like by default. That's just what we lapse to, if you will. And it's like we subconsciously act or feel in accordance with what the Bishop Rosie O'Neill said. Roxy, if you could put up that slide. Procrastination is the arrogant assumption that God owes you another chance to do tomorrow what he gave you the chance to do today. And I don't know that we consciously think that like we're going to be so arrogant toward him, but I think, we just get in that rut where we almost feel like we're owed, just like so many of us, we know that we could go a second from now, we could go any point, but most of us, if you ask them, we're pretty confident we'll be here tomorrow. I mean, that's the nature of how we are as people, and so, but I think we, end up to where, by default, we fall to that lapse. So in one respect, I think we've got it too good. We don't hurt enough. And that's what I was hearing. And I think that's
It,
part of it is we're not in such dire straits. So
it's interesting you say that. I had a business owner from England on my podcast, the 30 Minute Hour, And her thing is she built this multi-million-dollar business from her kitchen table.
Okay.
And I'm asking, like, how in the world did you build $1 million business from your kitchen? That's the obvious question, right? And so,
Right.
and here's what she said. She said, you know what? My husband left me. He was the only financial provider in the family. I had 2 kids, small kids. My husband just left. I had no way to, so I had to figure out, I had 2 small kids. They're looking at me, okay, how are we going to eat? And so I had to figure it out.
Right.
And so she took that. So a lot of times your desperation becomes your inspiration.
Yeah, most
And
definitely.
yeah, so when you're comfortable, and then you mentioned kind of the relationship with God and everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why you look at a lot of the people in the Bible, their conversion happened when they were at like a rock bottom moment, right?
Right.
But all they had to do is focus on that was their only option to get out of that situation.
Right. It's
So
like
no,
say,
I
we're
think
fine,
there's
our
some
arms are wide open.
right. That's their only option. So
Yeah, I hear you there. And in light of that, do you think or do you see our self-worth or lack thereof, how that might come into play?
100%. I
Yeah.
think it's like a thermostat, right?
Yeah.
I think it's no accident that you see like lottery winners who, yeah, they blow all the money, and that most of them end up going broke because that thermostat is set so low that they'll on a subconscious level start sabotaging themselves.
Right.
And what happens is we can play into that because of the stories we tell ourselves, right? So people say to me all the time, I am such a procrastinator. I always procrastinate. I am always late. But that's an identity statement, right? So you're going to act out in accordance to who you believe you are. So if you keep telling yourself that you always procrastinate, you're always going to procrastinate.
Right. It's sort of like Jesus told, he asked, I forget if it was a blind man or which one it was. It seems like it might have been the blind man, but with someone he healed, he said, the individual was asking Jesus to heal him. He says, do you believe I can do this? He said, I believe. And he says, become what you believe. It's like, or a self-fulfilling prophecy. What do you keep saying? Yeah. And where I was thinking along this lines is I like how the author of A Road Less Traveled, M. Scott Peck, how he stated it. Peck asserted, until you value yourself, you will not value your time. And if you do not value your time, you won't do anything with it. There you go. Until you value yourself, you will not value your time. Until you value your time, you will not do anything with it. And and we, I don't know if this is true everywhere across the world, but I see this a lot in the US, is that we have this false notion that if we don't we don't think too much of ourselves, then we're being humble. Like if I'm just a lowly person, or I'm this or that, that we think that's a humble thing, but really that's a false sense of pride. Because if you think, what are you saying? Where is the focus there? I'm not. It's still on you. That's pride. And God has called us to make the most of our opportunities, to redeem the time. In fact, in Ephesians chapter 5, I'm going to read starting in verse 8 is where I'm going to look out of here. And this is sort of before we get to that part of the section where we will need to the slide, but I'm going to start as in verse 8 as a lead in. And this is Paul writing to the church at Ephesus, and he's talking to these people are Gentiles who were once not of the people of God. This was before they were grafted. He was referring to before they were grafted in, and now they're part of the family. But he said, for you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. And then verse 14, therefore he says, awake, you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. Verse 15, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is, and do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. But in there, that redeeming the time, just like a manufacturer coupon, is redeemable even for the store. They can send it back to the manufacturer and get redeemed. But even if it's a store coupon or a restaurant coupon where they can't send it to get any money, it's redeemable for the customer. If we agree to spend $20, we get $5 off. That's that buying back. Redeeming the time is to make the most of it. And so for us to think less of ourselves and think, well, there's no point in me trying to do, focus so much to get more done. I'm just a lowly peason anyway. A lot of times, people tend to think they're being humble when no, you're still focusing on yourself. You're just saying you're lesser, and you're actually defying what the word tells us to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's no accident that if you look at the top level performers in any industry, they tend to be very confident. Mm-hmm. That's no accident. I think confidence is critical to success. It doesn't mean that you're being arrogant or you're being obnoxious, but I think there's a certain level of self-belief that you have to start with, that you have to come to the table with. That's like if a Navy SEAL were to walk in a room right now, you would probably recognize immediately that something different about this individual.
Right.
But he comes in the room with a certain confidence and belief in himself that he can overcome certain things. Exactly. And that's where your success comes from. So people are so afraid to come across as being too confident, but no, I think confidence is a good thing.
Yeah. And I think you can be confident and humble. A quiet confidence is like
yes. So here's the thing. It's a balance, right? So you're confident from the standpoint that you can do things, but you're humble enough to know that you need to put the work in, that you need to study, that you need to hire a coach, that you need to, be in a mastermind. You're humble to know that you just can't do it all by yourself. So I think the people that are truly successful, they have the right blend of humility and confidence. It's almost like if you look at David in the Bible, I think he's a classic example of that. When he was dealing with God, he was very humble. And he, if you look at some of those scriptures, he has a very humble approach and recognizes that it's not about him. But then when he's being the king, and he's going to battle, he's very confident, part because he knows that God is on his side. So I think you need that mix.
Oh, I agree. Very well said. And and I, this next part, curious. And before you answer this, I'm going to sort of elaborate on what I mean. But do you see ignorance as a contributing factor to procrastination? And I don't mean this in a harsh way, but let's look at the quote from Zig Ziglar. Zig said, many people complain about a lack of time when the lack of direction is the real problem. And I think of, in the same way, I think of it was the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto. He's the one who came up with the principle that was originally titled the Pareto Principle, but now we know better as the 80-20 rule. And of course, most of us know what that is, where 20% of your sales team will produce 80% of the sales, or 20% of your congregation will get 80% of the funds. Well, in the same way, when it comes to personally prioritizing your own life and in business, 20% of the activities you focus on, or the people you, the clientele you have, are going to give you 80% of the money you make in the business you bring in. And in light of that, I think of how many times this ignorance I'm referring to is they're directing their energy and focus, whether it be in the wrong areas or on the wrong people or on the wrong activities. But you see how that plays in.
Sure.
And then,
and one of the things I say in the book is that clarity is the starting point of success. So you mentioned ignorance. If you're ignorant to what your vision and purpose is, you'll say yes to all kinds of things. Right. So, but when you're really clear on what you are called to do and what your purpose is and what you're trying to accomplish, then you can start to. And I always help people to use their future as a filter, right? So you can ask yourself, how does this line up with where I'm going? So it's much easier. So what happens if you're ignorant to that? you start taking on all these people say, oh, hey, I need you to do this. Hey, I need you to chair this committee. Hey, I need you to, you're like, sure, yes, 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 yes. Now you're doing all of these things and it's not moving you forward. It's almost like you're on that hamster wheel. Yeah,
or the
you're
treadmill.
active, but you're not effective.
Right, exactly.
So yes.
Yeah, I follow you there. And so, as we think of this, these three things. One is we don't hurt enough. The second one is we don't think enough of ourselves, or we don't value ourselves enough. We think that, to think less of ourselves is being humble, where it was C.S. Lewis who once said, humility is not thinking less of self, but thinking of self less, and then the third one, this last one we just looked at, it was, you could say we're off course. We're driving down a path that leads to little or nothing. And so that begs the question, Eric, how do we get our feet on the right path? I mean, just how do we get our heart realigned to what's right and what's best? Just what are we to do? From what I understand, you have a tool that you take people through that helps them.
I do. So the tool is called it's a procrastination prevention pyramid. And it's something I came up with based off of my 28,000 plus coaching sessions with entrepreneurs and executive leaders. And so the pyramid, I think you said the graphic's going to be coming, but it's got 5 levels to the pyramid. And as you start to address each level, you'll find that you're overcoming procrastination. And
you have that, Roxy? She should be.
Okay.
But there
it is. Here we go. Yep. All right. So let's start at the foundation of the pyramid, which is your attitude. And I have attitude at the foundation of the pyramid because your attitude is at the foundation of your success. And studies show that the average person has 6,200 plus thoughts per day. The studies also show that 80% of those thoughts are negative. So we just have this habit of negativity, right? It's just this negativity habit that we have. And anytime you have a bad habit, you have to replace it with a better one. That's the way to overcome a bad habit. So you really have to be intentional about being positive. You have to check your attitude. So for example, you have to focus on your wins. And I have people to start a win log, right? So you basically take out a 3x5 card, you use a notebook, and as you're going through your day, take note of the victories. Take note of anything that promotes your personal or professional health. You can even throw spiritual, anything that promotes your spiritual health. So I did my workout like I planned. That's a win. I got a 5-star review in my business. That's a win. I went to the doctor. I got a clean bill of health. That's a win. So you have to, if you consciously start writing down your wins, you'll find that you have more wins to write down. So the attitude is critical. And it's the foundation, because if your attitude isn't right, you can do the other steps, but you'll still find yourself trapped. So first is the attitude. Next is awareness. And awareness is so critical. So one of the key things you need to be aware of is your power times, right? We all have times a day where our energy peaks. Some of us are morning people like me. Some people are night owls. But the key is to schedule your high priority activities during those times of day when you have the most energy. And so, like, really quick, I would try to write blog posts, for example, later in the evening, and I would get stuck. And I would start procrastinating. I'd put it off. And finally, I realized with myself that I have to do those types of activities early in the morning when I have more energy. Right?
Yeah.
So you have attitude, you have awareness. Next, you have animation, and that's about your energy levels, right? So studies show that you should exercise, get 30 minutes of cardio at a minimum of 3 days a week, and be conscious of your energy levels. If you look at any time that you were consistently procrastinating, it was usually during a time when you had no energy. And you also need to be proactive about recovery. And that has everything to do with sleep. That has everything to do with eating right, resting, taking vacations from time to time. But you have to be able to protect that energy. Next, we have automation. And the key thing with automation is to remember that just because something has to be done, it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Can you set up systems to automate certain tasks that aren't in your wheelhouse, right? That may be outside of your zone of genius, but you can set up little systems. You can hire a virtual assistant. There's a lot of different things you can do that where the things are getting done, you can delegate.
Right.
Delegate's not a bad word. You can delegate and focus on those core things. And then at the top of the pyramid, we have activity. And I put activity at the top because you can't take action until you can't get to the top until you take action. But it's like you said, 20% of your actions are getting you 80% of your results. So
Right.
the key is drilling in on those specific activities and not confusing activity with accomplishment.
Right. Okay. Amen to that. It makes me think of I think that was pretty much that last statement you said where activity is not accomplishment. I think that was the gist of what John Maxwell, one of his 21 laws of irrefutable leadership, the law of priorities. And I think it was about action is not necessarily accomplishment, or not getting confused because, yeah, you can be, and the scripture even talks about that. I think it was Paul to the church when he was writing to Timothy, and then also it might have even been to the church of Thessalonica, but he talked about a bunch of busybodies but weren't really doing anything, So yeah, I hear you there. And so, as we think of this and as we go through these, steps, what do you find is there one you see that's comes up time and time again as the hardest, the sort of the biggest hurdle to get over for most people?
Yes, the attitude. I'm telling you, that is the key thing. And a lot of times, let's say I'm working with someone who has a business, it's you can't. A lot of times they have the know-how and experience, but it's their mindset and their beliefs that are holding them back. And when I first started working with people, I would just focus on the numbers. Okay, hey, here's what we have to do. I would focus on the mechanics. Here's how we can fix this. But if there's a mindset issue, they're not going to go but so far. You really have to address that, and you have to be open to the fact that there's some I have blind spots. There's something that I'm missing. You have to really have a growth mindset. That's really what it is. A lot of people think, well, this is just how it's always going to be, but no, you have to understand that this can get better. So yeah, no, I think the attitude piece is critical.
So you would say I almost see that as you're helping them to do a run a diagnostic on the software, and if the software is bad, you got to reprogram it because that's sort of like your mind, your mentality. Because if this program is what's the word has a virus to it, that's going to screw everything up no matter how good the mechanics want to work. This is the controlling thing that directs it all. Yeah. So yeah, I hear you there. Yeah. And and it's it makes sense too because Satan, he realizes that if he can overtake your mind, he can run your life. He can rule it. That's the first point of contact. He knows if he can get you up here, I've won the day. You're mine. I can direct you, and and your life's in my hands. Basically, is the way he sees it. And are you talk with your people much about the word opportunity?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Because I think it's. I was going to say, I'm thinking of specifically. I'm one that I like to sort of talk about the background of words. A lot of times when we hear where they came from, it's almost like an aha, because like really, and that word comes from a term used years ago would be people in the lighthouse at the harbor calling when there'd be ships out on the sea and there's heavy winds and waves where tipsy topsy, and they know that the ships need to make it ashore before they flip over, and when the guy in the harbor or the lighthouse would see the winds have started to die down some. Here's your best time to move to shore. He would yell, "Opportune!" And that meant this is your most favorable time to get to shore. Because opportunity is not just a chance to do something. generally when we speak of an opportunity, it's the most favorable time to do it.
Absolutely. No, you gotta. I mean, you gotta seize the moment, and I just think your skills, your time, and everything has an expiration date,
Mm-hmm.
and you really have to move. I heard you have to seize the opportunity of a lifetime in the lifetime of an opportunity.
Right.
So I think that that's so important. No, opportunity is something very important to focus on.
Yeah. Because when I think of that, as we're talking about, procrastination, it's like one of my favorite proverbs. It's not a proverb found in the Old Testament there, but it's one that comes from the Japanese. The Japanese proverb states that one of those days means none of those days. And that's what we often hear when, oh, I'll get to it one of those days when we're procrastinating. We're putting it off. But that's often what that means is one of those days means none of those days. And so that's where, talk about opportunity, now's a good time, as good a time as any. Why keep putting it on the back burner? Yeah. And so, the attitude tends to be the hardest hurdle. And then, after that is it generally, I would be, I almost think it wouldn't be correct if I thought it would be easy after that. It's still going to be a challenge, right? But not as much, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a challenge. So the next piece, like awareness, is an issue for a lot of people too, because so I'll talk to people that say, "Oh, I always procrastinate on everything." Now, I have yet to meet someone who procrastinates in every area of their life, right? So some people, I know people who they procrastinate at work, but then when they're home with their kids, I mean, they're like a machine,
right?
Or I know people that procrastinate on household tasks,
right?
But then when they get to work, they're CEO, they're the vice president, they're on it. But when they get home, it's like, okay, why do I have to remind you to take the trash out every Thursday? What's going on with you? But you have to be aware of the patterns. So that's where awareness is. So a lot of people are just they don't have the awareness to recognize those types of patterns. Because if you recognize that, okay, I always procrastinate at work. Why am I procrastinating at work? And really starting to unpack it.
Mm-hmm. And do you find? I think of something that this is on a different subject, has to do with ethics, but I had can't think of who it was who wrote a book, but there was a book that seemed to really be that influenced a lot of society, and this is where things sort of went awry, for the way we view stuff. But it was someone wrote a book called Situational Ethics, and ethics are ethics. It shouldn't be going from situation to situation. It's like John Maxwell. He wrote a book. It's now titled Ethics 101. When he first put it out, it was titled, "There's no such thing as, quote, business ethics." And I love the way he shared in the intro or the preface before the first chapter. He was talking about, he was meeting with, I think it was the guy who was represented from Time Warner Publisher, but it was one of the people who publishes his books. And, they were having lunch one day and up there in New York. And the guy looked at John and said, "John, you would be the perfect guy to write a book on business ethics." And John said, "There's no such thing." And the guy practically fell out of his chair because he's like, "What?" But what he was getting at is when we have a set of ethics for family, for community, for business, for church, then if it's all over, that's not really ethics. And I think, like when you talk about how, you procrastinate here, but you don't here. If we can try to get our life lined up to where we're unified, no matter where we are, kind of, it's just a natural habitual part of us.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to be clear on, and I talk about this in the book, getting clear on what are your core values, right? Well, what are those values that you're aligned with? And then that should be how you carry yourself in every situation.
Right.
I mean, so character is one of those things. Character is all about who are you and what do you do when you don't think anybody's watching.
Right. Exactly. And that's essentially what core is, because core comes from a term from, I think it was Old English or New English. It goes back to I think it's the pre-Latin days or something, but of the Latin language. But it's the word courage, and it's also where we get the word courage. Courage in the French language. Well, if you take the word curve, where it also speaks of courage, what courage comes out of, but cur in French means heart. Just like courage is where we get core. And if we could even go back to the Hebrew days, ancient Hebrews, to them, the very heart was their heart was the very center of a person's being. It's where the mind, the intellect, and the emotions, the spirit all flowed from. Everything flowed from the heart. That's why Jesus said, find it in two different places. In Matthew 12:34, Luke 6:45, he said, for out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaketh, or out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And then you look at Proverbs 4:23, where it says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Everything springs from. And, and that heart, to the ancient Hebrews, the heart was at the very core, the very center. And just like you think of, what do we plant that gives growth and grows? Seeds. The very core of an apple is the center, and that's where the seeds are. But the core, that's where everything was at. And, and so when we speak about core values, whether we're talking about an individual person or a company, we're saying this is at the heart of who we are. This defines us, and that. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So like, I know companies, like one of their values is doing the right thing, right? That's gonna be one of it. And then so if they get into a situation, let's say the customer wants this and that. Okay, what's the right thing?
Right.
So now they've got this. Okay, this is what we value. So we can always line this up with the situation. So you're consistent in every walk.
Right.
That's why I think it's so important for people to identify what your core values are.
Yeah, and then you want to line those up with your purpose, which is what I see you sort of work toward as you narrow down to the activity. That all aligns together.
Yes.
And you don't want one violating the other. Well, Eric, we're almost to the end, not quite, but we're coming down to the show, and Eric has wanted to share with you a book he has written. It's an ebook, and Eric's going to give you his email address, and if you would like to send him an email, just say that you saw him on the Insights to Incite show, or mention my name, Brandon Lawson, and he will send you that ebook. And there is his email on the screen.
Absolutely. So yeah, my email, eric@ericmtwigs.com. So the book is called One Moment in Time, Preparing Your Life for Your Defining Moment. It'll help you. You see these people that seem like they have a breakthrough. Maybe, in the old days, the comedian would go on Johnny Carson. He'd be unknown. But after that, his life changes, and now he's famous.
Right.
Well, there's a lot that goes behind that. So you have to be prepared for your defining moment. The book is designed to encourage you, because I know I have somebody watching me. You feel like you're doing the right thing. You're grinding, but nobody notices. You're not hitting the level that you think you should be hitting, but just hang in there, because you're really just one conversation away from that breakthrough. And there's some things that you need to be thinking about. And so the book will help you, give you hope, and it'll help you to think about those things to prepare you for your breakthrough. So I'll send it to you just because you were watching us or listening to us today on this show. It's called One Moment in Time. That's my ebook. Again, go to eric@ericmtwigs.com. You email me and I'll send it to you.
Okay. And and I wanted to take a moment. There was 3 different individuals I spoke to just in the last, just yesterday, all 3 of them. And that is Susan Kerrigan. And there's also Tracy Canary, as well as Tammy Treon. And if you ladies came and joined us for the show, I certainly glad you came, and would love for you to be back each week. But just wanted to put that out there, because I try to personally. So a lot of times I get to talking with people about, what I do and the show and that and stuff. Those folks, they'll, sort of be intrigued when you have a show, and, I tell them how they can find me. And so if you came, thank you. And I hope you found something useful, and we'll be back next week. And so, Eric, is there anything else that you want to share? Because if, once you do, or if there was anything, I had something I was going to share with the people that comes from your media kit. I was just going to share with them some of the what it your message, or there was some people who heard you speak. There's some people who gave testimonies of you.
Oh, sure. Go right ahead and share it. That's awesome.
Okay. Just making sure you didn't have anything before I did. Okay, so I'm going to read right here, and this comes out of his media kit. Open it up. And I thought this is speaks very well and something to give you sort of more of an insight on Eric. What others are saying about Eric. It says Eric Twiggs is one of those rare speakers who can wrap his message in wisdom, humor, and a process that will take your audience to the next level. An investment in Eric is money well spent. Ed Tate, Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking, Certified Speaking Professional. And then we have Donna Warren, who's a human resource manager, said, after hearing Eric speak, what stayed with me was him saying, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. I then realized I was stuck because I wanted the perfect hour of morning exercise, but I was not doing anything. So I decided it's time to do something and progress. Now I get on the treadmill at 5:30 a.m. and follow up with 100 sit-ups for 30 minutes. It is not perfection. It is progress.
That's awesome. Two very rewarding testimonials there.
Yeah, most definitely. And then the final one here, just real quick, says, Brother Eric Twiggs was the keynote speaker for the opening session of our 3rd District Conference. I was both inspired and challenged by his presentation, and at the conclusion of his remarks, I felt challenged to do more for Omega. If you are looking for a speaker who can address serious issues in a profound manner through a most practical mix of intellect, wit, and humor, Eric is your first choice. I look forward to him presenting to the Brotherhood assembled at the Grand Conclave. Curtis Baylor, former Grand Keeper of the Records and Seal, Men of Omega, Sci-Fi Fraternity Incorporated. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for reading that. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to try to get that in there at the end for good closing remarks, because at the beginning you don't want to top pile everything at the outset. But yeah, but I thought this was something that I really liked myself, and I thought, this would be good. Speaks well of you, and so I didn't want to exclude them. So good. So your show, I know it's the 30-minute hour, and what day and time is that on?
Yeah, so we go live on Mondays at 7 o'clock for the 30-minute hour podcast. They can find it on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we also, it gets is recorded and edited, and then you can catch it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, any of those places.
Okay. And is that AM or PM?
7 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Thanks for Brandon. Thanks for clarifying that. I want people at 7 a.m. looking for me. I'm not going to be there. 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, when you said 7 p.m. or 7 o'clock, I thought, if you said 4 o'clock, we probably know it's going to be p.m. But 7, I thought I could fall to either.
No, that's something good to know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks again for joining us, and love to have you back, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Brandon. This has been an awesome show. I had a great time.
Yep. Thanks, Rox.
Wow, what an insightful show. Thanks for listening in and watching today. If you missed any part of today's show or any other episode, check it out on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Now take today's insight and utilize it. Incite yourself to action and to excellence in the week ahead, and join us again next Thursday and every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time for another insightful session with Brandon Lawson as he speaks to us and shares some more insights to incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV.